They say you can't freeze to death if you're already numb inside. I was about to test that theory. The wind howled louder than any wolf that night. Snow fell in thick flakes that accumulated at the cave entrance where I huddled, arms wrapped around my knees as if they could protect me from the cold that penetrated my bones. My blonde hair, normally my only feature of beauty, was matted and filthy after 3 days wandering the Blackwood Mountains, territory that no longer belonged to me. The selection ritual had happened 4 nights ago. I could still smell the burning cedar, hear the drums, see the pitying looks. Or was it contempt? When Cain Blackthorn, the Alpha King himself, walked past every eligible female of mating age without so much as a glance in my direction. He didn't even turn his head toward me. For an Omega like me, the lowest in the hierarchy, this shouldn't have been a surprise. But my grandmother always clutched the small silver moon pendant that now hung around my neck and whispered words I carried like prayers. Remember, Aria, true strength doesn't roar, it waits. The irony was that now I was only waiting for death. A distant howl made the hair on my neck stand up. This wasn't just any howl, it was a hunting call. I pressed closer against the cold cave wall, knowing they would find me soon. The rejected ones like me had no permission to remain on clan lands without a bond or function. It was the law. And I had exceeded my departure deadline by 2 days, simply because I had nowhere to go. The sound of paws on snow made me hold my breath. Through the cave entrance, I saw an enormous gray wolf enter, its eyes glowing in the darkness like yellow lanterns. Behind it, another. And another. I counted 12 in total, all looking exhausted and wounded. The largest among them, with a scar cutting across its snout from eye to jaw, stared at me intently. I should have felt fear, but something inside me, perhaps the Omega instinct to care for others, or perhaps just the desperation of someone who had nothing left to lose, made me stand slowly. My voice was hoarse from disuse. There's a spring of water at the back of this cave. I can help if you'll let me. The scarred wolf tilted its head as if evaluating my words. A smaller wolf, with fur almost white, whimpered in pain and staggered. Without thinking twice, I ran to support it. The large gray wolf growled, but didn't attack when I began examining a deep wound on the white wolf's paw. This is a cut made by silver. I recognized the characteristic burning smell that silver caused on our skin. Human hunters. The gray wolf just continued watching me, its eyes never leaving mine. There was something familiar about it, but I couldn't identify what. I used my weakened state as an excuse not to think too much about it. Instead, I tore a piece from my already battered linen shirt and went to the water source, wetting the fabric to clean the injured wolf's wounds. One by one, they allowed me to tend to their injuries. Some had silver cuts, others burns. 2 of them seemed to suffer from extreme exhaustion. As the night progressed, I used all the herbs I had collected during my solitary journey, silently thanking my grandmother for teaching me about healing properties when no one else cared to teach me anything. The gray wolf was the last. He kept his distance while I cared for the others, always vigilant. When I finally approached him, I noticed he had the worst of the wounds. A piece of silver metal still lodged near his shoulder, almost invisible under the thick fur. "This is going to hurt," I warned as if he could understand me, "but I need to remove it or the silver will keep burning." Surprisingly, he lay down, exposing the wound. My fingers trembled as I worked to extract the silver fragment, feeling the heat of the fever beginning to consume him. Wolfmen were strong, but silver was silver, pure poison for our species. When I finally removed the metal, a collective sigh seemed to pass through the cave. The other wolves, who had formed a circle around us, visibly relaxed. I applied an herbal poultice to the wound and stepped back, suddenly conscious that 12 deadly predators were watching me. "You can rest here," I said, backing toward my isolated corner. I was leaving anyway. A low growl from the gray wolf made me stop. He rose with difficulty and walked toward me, his enormous body casting a shadow that swallowed me completely. Fear finally settled in my stomach like a cold stone. I closed my eyes, waiting for the fatal blow. Instead, I felt a warm muzzle touch my forehead in a gesture that among wolves meant protection and gratitude. When I opened my eyes again, the wolf had lain down beside me, his body warm as a furnace against the cave's cold. The other wolves approached, forming a circle around us. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the cold of rejection corroding me from within. Instead, a strange sense of belonging, something I had never experienced in the clan, wrapped around me like a blanket. I fell asleep among wolves who should have been my enemies, but that night seemed more like family than anyone from my own clan ever had. My dreams were restless, filled with fragmented childhood memories. My mother being taken by hunters when I was only 5 years old. My father withering from grief until he died a year later. My grandmother raising me in the forgotten corners of the clan village, always protecting me with her moon amulet. "The moon calls those who have its light within," she used to say, her eyes already clouded with age, but still bright with wisdom. "When darkness is complete, Aria, that's when your light will be most needed." I woke to the gentle touch of human fingers on my face, no longer the rough fur of a wolf. I opened my eyes with a start and recoiled in fear. A man knelt before me, watching me with disturbing intensity. His eyes were deep amber, the same as the gray wolf's, and a scar cut his face from right eye to chin. Around us there were no more wolves, only men, all in various states of undress, covering themselves as best they could with scraps of fabric and furs. And then sudden recognition hit me like lightning. "Cain," I whispered, disbelief coloring my voice. "You know who I am," he said, his voice deep as distant thunder. It wasn't a question. "The Alpha King," I responded automatically, lowering my eyes as I had been taught. "I ask forgiveness for the intrusion on your lands. You just saved the lives of 12 warriors," he completed, his tone indecipherable, "including mine." One of the men I recognized as the wounded white wolf approached. "My Alpha, the sun is rising." Cain nodded and stood, his impressive height making him almost touch the cave ceiling. He extended a hand to me, a gesture so unexpected that I was paralyzed for a few seconds. "Come," he ordered, though his voice had softened. Trembling, I accepted his hand and stood. He led me to the cave entrance, where the first rays of sun were beginning to gild the snow-covered mountains. The spectacle was breathtaking, the white world glittering as if covered in diamonds, the sky a perfect gradient of blue and pink. Cain turned to me, his penetrating gaze studying every detail of my face. I had to resist the impulse to touch my disheveled hair or try to clean the dirt that surely covered my skin. "What is your name?" he asked, seeming genuinely curious. "Aria," I responded, surprised he didn't know. After all, he had passed by all the available females during the ritual. His eyes gleamed with something I couldn't identify. "Aria," he repeated, as if tasting the flavor of my name, the rejected one who sheltered the king and his warriors. I averted my gaze, embarrassed. "I didn't know exactly who you were," I admitted. "Exactly," he responded, a half-smile appearing on his lips. "You helped without knowing, without expecting reward or recognition." The other warriors had gathered behind him, forming a half-moon. All watched me with solemn expressions. Cain then did something I would never forget. He knelt before me, the Alpha King, kneeling before the lowest in the hierarchy. A collective gasp echoed through the cave, but he didn't speak the words I expected. Instead, he remained there, at my level, his amber eyes holding mine with an intensity that made my heart race. "Tell me, Aria, why did you help us? You owe this clan nothing. We gave you nothing but contempt." The question caught me off guard. I expected commands, declarations, perhaps even threats. Not this. Not genuine curiosity about my motivations. I looked past him at the 11 other warriors. Some still bore traces of the wounds I had treated. All watched me with an attention I had never received in my life. "You didn't," I said quietly. "The clan did. You saw me, even if just for 3 seconds." Something shifted in Cain's expression. Surprise flickered across his scarred face, followed by something deeper, recognition perhaps, or respect. 3 seconds, he murmured, more to himself than to me. "You counted. Everyone counts the moments they're seen," I responded. "When you spend your life invisible, you notice when someone actually looks at you." A heavy silence fell over the cave. Even the wind outside seemed to have stilled, waiting. Kane slowly rose to his full height, but his eyes never left mine. "I can't order you back to the clan. You were exiled." That was unjust. His jaw tightened as if the admission cost him something. "But I'm asking, will you guide us back? The hunters are still tracking us. Your knowledge of these mountains could save our lives." I blinked, confused. "You need a guide? That's all?" "For now." His voice lowered. "After that, I'd like to offer you a choice I should have given at the ritual." Before I could respond, a howl cut through the morning air. The smile disappeared from Kane's face, replaced by the predator expression I had first known. "The hunters," one of the warriors said. "They followed us." Kane's gaze found mine again, now calculating and cold. "The choice has been made for now. We need to survive first. Will you help us?" I looked at the 12 warriors, at their wounds, their exhaustion, their loyalty to the man who led them. Something in my chest tightened. Not fear, something else. Purpose, perhaps. "Yes," I said, the word coming out stronger than I expected. "But not for the clan. For you 12. Your pack now." The warriors exchanged glances. I saw surprise, confusion, even a hint of respect in some eyes, and Omega calling them pack. The hierarchy reversed. Kane's expression transformed. The cold calculation melted into something warm, almost vulnerable. "Then let's move," he said, but his hand found mine, squeezed once. "Thank you." Those 2 words, spoken with such sincerity, meant more than any grand declaration could have. We moved quickly through the cave depths. I led them to a spot my grandmother had shown me years ago. Behind a natural rock formation, I pushed against a stone that revealed a narrow passage. "How did you know about this?" Kane asked, his breath warm against my neck as we prepared to enter the tunnel. "My grandmother was the keeper of old stories," I explained, feeling a tightness in my throat at the memory of her. After being declared Omega, I was forbidden from learning clan traditions, but she taught me in secret. "Your grandmother?" He hesitated. "Was she Celine?" I stopped abruptly, turning to him with difficulty in the confined space. "You knew her?" His eyes gleamed strangely in the darkness. Everyone knew Celine. Before she became a recluse, she was my father's most respected counselor. This revelation left me stunned. My grandmother? Respected? She had never mentioned this, always presenting herself as a simple storyteller. Why would she hide such a past? And why, being so important, did they allow her granddaughter to be demoted to Omega? A distant shout interrupted my thoughts. The hunters had found the cave. "Keep moving," Kane ordered, his voice now urgent. "We can't stop." We crawled for several more minutes until the tunnel began to widen. Finally, I emerged into a small clearing protected by dense pine trees. The snow here was shallower, and the morning sun filtered through the trees, creating golden patterns on the white ground. One by one, the warriors emerged from the tunnel, looking around cautiously. "We're at least 3 kilometers from the cave," one warrior informed. "The dark-skinned one I would learn was named Rowan, but they have dogs. They'll follow our trail." "We need to split up," Kane said. "Confuse the trail." "No." The word came out before I could stop it. Everyone looked at me with astonishment at the tone I had used with the Alpha. I mean, splitting up is what they expect. The Silver Hunters have studied our patterns for generations. Kane frowned, but something in his eyes encouraged me to continue. "If we split up, they'll hunt us one by one," I explained. "Wounded as you are, you won't be able to defend yourselves alone. We need to find water, a stream, anything to mask our scent." "And then?" Kane asked, his tone now curious rather than challenging. My thoughts raced frantically. What would my grandmother do? The amulet around my neck seemed to warm, as if responding to my silent question. Then, I took a deep breath. "We go to the one place they wouldn't look for us. The human village." A murmur of disapproval ran through the group. Kane raised a hand, silencing them. "Explain," he ordered. "Silver hunters aren't welcome in common villages," I elaborated, remembering what my grandmother had told me. "Normal humans don't know about us, and the hunters keep their hunt secret. They disguise themselves as travelers or merchants. If we blend in with humans, the hunters won't be able to attack us openly without revealing their true nature." A thoughtful silence followed my words. Finally, the white-furred warrior, Asher, spoke. She might be right, my alpha. The hunters operate in shadows. Revealing themselves would mean losing the church support that finances them. Cain observed me with disconcerting intensity. You're not what you seem, Aria. I didn't know how to interpret that, so I just looked away. There's a stream east of here. If we hurry, we can reach it before the dogs find our trail. Without waiting for a response, I started walking, feeling the weight of 12 gazes on my back. To my surprise, I heard footsteps following me. Cain had given the silent order to accompany me. We walked for almost an hour, the sun now high in the sky, melting the snow on the highest branches. When we finally reached the stream, it was partially frozen, but the central current still flowed vigorously. Follow the stream for 200 meters, I instructed. Then cross and continue on the other bank. The warriors obeyed me without question, an experience so new for me it almost made me dizzy. I had always been the last to be heard, the last to receive food, the last to have rights to anything in the clan. Seeing these powerful warriors following my instructions seemed like some kind of feverish dream. As we walked through the freezing water, Cain approached, keeping pace beside me. "How does an Omega know so much about strategies against hunters?" he asked, his voice low enough that only I could hear. I hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. When you're invisible, you learn a lot just by watching and listening. You were never invisible to me. This statement caught me completely off guard. "What?" He kept his eyes fixed on the horizon. "At the ritual." "You think I didn't see you? You walked right past me." I argued, confused. "I walked past everyone," he corrected. "I was looking for something specific." "And what was that?" A slight smile curved his lips. "Patience, observation, the ability to remain calm under pressure. Qualities Aluna needs, qualities rarely valued in our society." I couldn't respond. My beliefs about my own identity, the rejected one, the invisible one, were being challenged at a fundamental level. "The village is just ahead," he said, changing the subject. "How do you plan to disguise us? 12 half-naked men will certainly attract attention." It was a valid question. The warriors wore only the remains of their pants torn during transformation. Some had improvised cold protection with pieces of animal fur found in the cave, but they still looked too wild for a human village. "There's an abandoned cabin near here," I responded. "It belonged to a common human hunter, not a silver one. He died 2 winters ago. There might be clothes there." Cain nodded, his expression now respectful. "Lead us there." The cabin was as I remembered, small, rustic, and partially covered with snow. The door creaked when I pushed it, revealing a dusty but intact interior. Beams of light entered through cracks in the window boards, illuminating dust particles dancing in the air. "Look for clothes," Cain ordered his men, who immediately began searching through chests and cupboards. They found enough pieces of clothing for everyone, though some were too small for the more corpulent warriors. The final result was strange. Powerful wolf men, dressed as human peasants, some with pants too short, or sleeves that barely covered their forearms. When it was Cain's turn, only a simple linen shirt and coarse wool pants remained. To my surprise, he put them on without complaint, though the fabric visibly stretched over his muscles. "And now?" asked Rowan, looking uncomfortable in his new garments. "We need a story," Cain responded, looking at me. All eyes turned in my direction again, expectant. I took a deep breath, organizing my thoughts. "We're pilgrims," I suggested, "on our way to the shrine of St. William in the northern mountains. We were attacked by bandits who stole our belongings, including our horses." "St. William?" Cain raised an eyebrow. "He's a saint venerated by common hunters," I explained. "My grandmother told me his shrine is 2 weeks' journey from here, enough time to justify our temporary presence in the village." The men exchanged impressed looks. Asher smiled openly. "The Luna has a sharp brain," he commented, using my new title for the first time. The term still sounded strange, almost unreal. "We need names," another warrior reminded. "We can't use our real names. The hunters know all the important alphas." "I'll be Edmund," Cain decided. "You choose common human names, nothing elaborate that might draw attention." While the warriors debated their new names, Kane approached me. "Will you be my wife in this story?" he said without making it a question. I blushed intensely, grateful for the cabin's dim light that hid my reaction. "As you wish, my alpha." "Kane," he corrected softly. "Between us, I'm just Kane." There was something in his voice, a note I couldn't fully identify. It wasn't just kindness. It seemed almost like vulnerability. Before I could respond, a distant howl cut the air. Not a wolf's howl, but the artificial sound of a hunting horn. "They're closer than we thought," Rowan warned, tense again. "To the village," Kane ordered. "Now!" As we hurried toward the human village, I realized that in less than a day, my life had completely transformed. From rejected Omega to declared Luna, from solitary to part of a group, from hunted to strategist. The moon amulet around my neck seemed to pulse against my skin, as if wanting to remind me of my grandmother's words. The moon calls those who have its light within. I looked at Kane, who walked ahead with the imposing posture of a born leader, even dressed in simple human clothes. Whether he had genuinely chosen me to be his Luna, or if it was just a strategy to survive this situation, I still didn't know. But as we approached the first houses of the village, one certainty grew inside me. Nothing would be as it was before. Ravenwood Village was larger than I remembered. Rows of wood and stone cabins stretched along a muddy main street, with smoke rising from chimneys into the cold morning air. Humans moved in their daily routines. Women carrying bread baskets, men transporting firewood, children chasing chickens through the melting snow. When we entered through the village's simple gates, I felt the warriors' tension increase. Wolves rarely ventured into human territory, especially in large groups. Instinct told them to transform and attack or flee, not smile and wave like common visitors. "Relax," Kane murmured, his voice too low for human ears. "Breathe through your nose. The smells are strong, but manageable. Keep your eyes down if you feel the change beginning." We walked in natural formation, with Kane at the front and me at his side. The other warriors followed us in small groups, trying to look like tired pilgrims rather than dangerous predators. To my surprise, Kane took my hand as we advanced. The warmth of his skin sent a shock up my arm, making my heart race for reasons that had nothing to do with danger. "Edmund and Aria," he repeated in a low voice, reminding us of our false names. "Married for a year? Children?" I swallowed hard. "None yet." Kane nodded, his face a mask of concentration, though I could swear I saw the corner of his lips curve slightly. As we approached, the humans watched us with curiosity and a bit of distrust. We were strangers after all, and strangers rarely brought good news during winter. An elderly woman at a bakery entrance frowned, staring fixedly at Rowan, whose muscles were visible even under borrowed clothes. "Where exactly are we going?" I whispered to Kane. "We need shelter and information," he responded. "An inn would be ideal. There's one at the end of the main street," I informed, "the Golden Owl. But we'll need money." Kane slid his hand inside his shirt and withdrew a small leather pouch hanging from a cord around his neck. "An alpha always carries gold. You never know when you'll need to buy your safety." In the village center, a small crowd had formed around a notice nailed to a post. A man read aloud for those who couldn't decipher the letters. "By order of Bishop Thomas, any information about criminal bands in the forests must be reported immediately to authorities. Reward in silver for information leading to capture." I felt Kane stiffen beside me. The silver hunters were already spreading their net. Bishop was a common disguise for hunter leaders. "Let's go," he murmured, subtly quickening his pace. The Golden Owl was a 2-story building with stone walls and a steep roof covered in snow. A worn owl symbol was carved above the main door. When we entered, the warmth of a large fireplace greeted us along with the aroma of fermented beer and stew. The hall was half empty, with only a few travelers and locals distributed among the rustic wooden tables. A corpulent man in a stained apron assessed us from his position behind the counter. "What do you desire, strangers?" he asked, his gaze lingering on the muscular men behind us. Kane immediately assumed the role of Edmund the Pilgrim. His posture changed subtly, his shoulders relaxing, his voice adopting a softer and more respectful tone. "Good morning, sir. I'm Edmund. This is my wife, Aria. We're pilgrims on our way to the shrine of St. William, along with our companions. We were attacked by bandits on the road and lost most of our belongings. I seek shelter for my wife and my friends, plus information about the road ahead." The innkeeper studied us for a moment before nodding slowly. "Bandits, yes. There have been many reports lately. Strange men in the forests." He made the sign of the cross. "Rooms will cost 2 silver coins each. I can accommodate you in 3 large rooms." "We accept," Kane responded, placing several coins on the counter. "And we would appreciate hot meals." "Certainly, certainly." The innkeeper called to a young girl sweeping the corner of the hall. "Agnes, prepare the upper floor rooms for our guests." The girl nodded and hurried up a wooden staircase. The innkeeper returned his attention to us. "Come, sit. The stew is hot and the bread is fresh. You must be famished after your ordeal." There was something in the way he said the last words that made me uneasy, but I followed Kane to a long table near the fireplace. The warriors distributed themselves around it, their eyes constantly assessing the environment and possible threats. While we ate the simple but comforting stew, I noticed Kane never completely relaxed. His eyes were always moving, observing each entrance and exit, each new customer who entered the inn. "What will we do now?" I asked quietly when the others were distracted with food. "We wait," he responded. "The hunters will be searching the forests. If they don't find our trail, they'll eventually reach the village. We need to be ready to leave when that happens." "And where will we go?" He looked at me with those intense eyes. "Home, to clan territory." I felt my stomach sink. "I can't go back," I murmured. "I was exiled. Without a bond, an Omega can't return." "You're my Luna now," he interrupted, his voice firm but gentle. "No one will question your right to be there." I wanted to believe him, but years of rejection and humiliation didn't disappear with a few words. "Why me?" The question escaped before I could stop it. At the ritual, there were stronger, more beautiful females from purer bloodlines. Kane looked around, making sure no one was listening to us. Then he leaned closer, his face inches from mine. "You still don't understand, do you? The ritual wasn't to choose the strongest or most beautiful female. It was a character test." His voice lowered even more. "I observed each candidate for weeks before the ritual. I saw how they treated others when they thought no one was watching. I saw arrogance, cruelty, unbridled ambition." "And what did you see in me?" I asked, barely able to breathe. His gaze softened. "I saw compassion. Silent strength. A wolf who shared her scarce food with orphaned pups, who treated the wounds of elders when everyone else ignored them, who read to the blind and taught children to recognize medicinal herbs." Each of his words left me more stunned. I had done all these things, yes, but always hidden, fearing ridicule. How could he know? "I needed a Luna who understood the true meaning of leadership," he continued. "Not dominating, but serving. Not ordering, but guiding. You showed me that every day, thinking no one was watching. You observed me all this time?" An enigmatic smile curved his lips. "Alphas have a special gift. We can mask our presence when necessary. I can be in a room without anyone noticing if I so choose." This revelation made me reevaluate every moment I thought I was alone. The implications were both disturbing and strangely comforting. Before I could respond, the inn door opened, letting in a blast of cold air and 3 men dressed in dark capes. Instantly, I felt Kane stiffen beside me. The newcomers didn't have the common smell of humans. There was something metallic, something that made my instincts scream in alert. "Silver hunters," I whispered, almost without moving my lips. Kane made a subtle gesture with his hand, and the warriors around the table immediately positioned themselves in disguised alert. Rowan slid a knife from the table into his sleeve. Asher shifted position, his back to the wall. The 3 men approached the innkeeper, who received them with an exaggerated bow. "Father Benedict, it's an honor. How may I serve you?" The oldest man, with graying hair and eyes cold as ice, smiled without joy. "We seek information, good man. We're hunting dangerous criminals who escape the church's justice, a group of men with peculiar characteristics." "What kind of characteristics, Father?" the innkeeper asked, though his nervous glance in our direction suggested he already suspected. "Large men, strong beyond normal." The false priest responded, his eyes scanning the hall. capable of withstanding wounds that would kill common men, possibly accompanied by a blonde woman. I felt my blood freeze. The description was too specific to be coincidence. They knew we were here, or at least strongly suspected it. The innkeeper cleared his throat. I don't know about criminals, Father, but we received a group of pilgrims today on their way to the shrine of St. William. The hunter's eyes narrowed, and he followed the direction of the innkeeper's nervous gaze to our table. When his look met Kane's, something passed between them. Recognition, challenge, ancestral hatred. Pilgrims, yes. The hunter smiled again, his teeth too white, too sharp. How fascinating. Perhaps we should introduce ourselves. Kane stood slowly, his posture relaxed, but I could feel the controlled energy emanating from him. A predator preparing to attack or defend. Good afternoon, Father, he greeted with studied calm. My name is Edmund. We are indeed pilgrims. It's been a difficult journey here. The hunter approached, his two companions flanking him like shadows. Up close, I could see the metallic gleam under his sleeves, hidden silver blades. Edmund, the hunter repeated, pronouncing the name as if tasting it. And this would be your wife? Aria, Kane responded, placing a protective hand on my shoulder. The hunter's gaze slid to me, and I felt like a serpent was assessing me. His eyes landed on the amulet around my neck, and something in his expression changed. A beautiful pendant. He commented, extending his hand as if to touch it. Instinctively, I recoiled. Kane moved subtly, placing himself between us. A gift from my late grandmother. I responded, trying to keep my voice steady. Fascinating, the hunter repeated, his eyes never leaving the amulet. You know, it reminds me very much of an ancient symbol, a heresy we've been fighting for generations. The tension in the air was so dense it could be cut with a knife. Kane's warriors had imperceptibly approached, ready to attack at the slightest sign. The hunter's companions also strategically positioned themselves around the hall. I don't understand what you're talking about, Father, Kane said, his voice perfectly controlled. We're simple faithful seeking St. William's blessing. The hunter smiled again, that cold smile that didn't reach his eyes. Of course, of course. Forgive my curiosity. Dangerous times make us cautious. He stepped back, but his eyes were still fixed on us. I must say I rarely see such robust pilgrims. St. William must appreciate strong followers. We work the land, Kane responded. It's good for the muscles, without doubt. The hunter gave a small nod. Well, we won't disturb you further for now. Rest well, pilgrims. The journey ahead may be harder than you imagine. With a last penetrating look, he turned and, followed by his companions, left the inn. Only when the door closed behind them did I feel I could breathe again. They know, Rowan murmured. They suspect, Kane corrected. If they were certain, they would have already attacked. The amulet, I said, touching the moon pendant. He recognized it. Kane nodded, his eyes still fixed on the door. We need to leave here, now. We can't just flee, I argued. They'll be watching all the village exits. You're right, he agreed to my surprise. We need a better plan. At that moment, the innkeeper approached, his face pale and sweaty. I ask forgiveness, sir. I didn't want to cause trouble. You betrayed us. Asher growled, low enough that other customers couldn't hear. They arrived yesterday, the man whispered nervously. They threatened my family if I didn't report the arrival of strangers. Please, sir, I have small children. Kane raised his hand, silencing Asher's protest. We understand. We don't blame you. The relief on the innkeeper's face was momentary. You need to go. They'll return with reinforcements. How much time do we have? Kane asked. Until nightfall, perhaps. They went to fetch the others from the forest. Kane nodded thoughtfully. Your rooms are ready? Yes, sir. Then we'll use them. My men need to rest a few hours. When the innkeeper moved away, Kane turned to me, his eyes gleaming with an intensity that left me breathless. You said you knew this region, he spoke. Is there another way out of the village without going through the main gates? I closed my eyes, mentally visualizing the map my grandmother had taught me to memorize. There's an old tunnel under the abandoned barn on the north edge. It was used for smuggling during the kingdom's wars. It leads beyond the village limits, emerging near the frozen river. Again, Kane looked at me with a mixture of surprise and admiration. "How do you know these things?" I touched the amulet. "My grandmother said knowledge is power, and the powerless must know all escape routes." He nodded slowly. "A wise woman, your grandmother." His gaze shifted to the window, where the light was beginning to dim with the approach of late afternoon. "We'll rest for 3 hours. We leave at twilight." As we climbed to the rooms, I felt the weight of everything that had happened in the last 24 hours hit me like an avalanche. From exiled to Luna, from prey to strategist, from invisible to what? Kane's look when he observed me contained something I had never experienced before. It wasn't just respect or gratitude. It was something deeper, more disturbing. In the narrow corridor leading to the rooms, he stopped and turned to me. "You'll stay in the room with me," he said without making it a question. My heart raced, but I kept my face impassive. "As you wish, my alpha." "Kane," he corrected again, his voice softer. "Between us, always Kane." Then, to my complete surprise, he leaned forward and touched my forehead with his, the most intimate gesture possible between wolves, normally reserved for true mates who had already passed through the bonding ceremony. "Rest, Aria," he murmured against my skin. "I'll need your strength and wisdom before this night ends." With that, he opened the room door and gestured for me to enter first. I passed by him, feeling his warmth and scent enveloping me like a promise. A promise of what? I still didn't know. The room was simple: a narrow bed with a straw mattress, a small table with a basin and water pitcher, and a window overlooking the back of the inn. Kane immediately went to the window, assessing escape routes. "Rest," he said without turning. "You'll need your strength." I hesitated, looking at the only bed. Sleeping on the floor wouldn't be a problem for me. As an Omega, I rarely had the privilege of my own bed in the clan. But something stopped me from simply settling into the corner of the room, as I would have done before. Kane noticed my hesitation and turned. Something in his gaze changed upon seeing my expression. "Come here," he said, his voice gentler than I had ever heard. I approached cautiously, stopping an arm's distance away. He slowly raised his hand, and to my surprise, touched my face, his fingers delicately tracing the line of my jaw. "You carry so much fear," he observed. "Not of me, but of what I represent, the power I have over you." I lowered my eyes, unable to deny it. "I was taught to fear alphas," I admitted. "For good reasons, I imagine." He sighed. "Many of us abuse our position. We confuse strength with right." I raised my eyes, surprised by his words. "Does it surprise you to hear an alpha admit flaws?" He smiled slightly at seeing my reaction. "Honestly, yes." He took a step back and sat on the edge of the bed, indicating the space beside him. After a moment of hesitation, I sat down, maintaining a respectful distance. "My father was like many alphas," Kane began, looking at his own hands. "He believed power should be maintained through fear, that strength was the only true law. And you don't agree? I discovered early that fear generates obedience, but not loyalty." His eyes found mine. "I witnessed the result of that when our clan was attacked by silver hunters 10 years ago. Several wolves simply fled when they had the chance. They felt no motivation to protect an alpha who treated them like disposable objects. That episode had happened when I was very young, but I remembered the whispers, the funerals, the fear. I never knew the details, as no one bothered to tell stories to an Omega." "That's when your father died," I said softly. He nodded, a glimmer of old pain passing through his eyes. "And when I promised myself I would be a different kind of leader, that I would build a clan based on mutual loyalty, not fear." "Is that why it took so long to choose a Luna? Everyone said you were excessively demanding." An ironic smile curved his lips. "Demanding, yes, but not in the way they thought. I wasn't seeking beauty or physical strength or pure bloodline. I was seeking someone who understood what it truly means to lead, and you found that in me, an Omega who could barely lead her own life." He turned completely to me, his eyes shining with intensity. "You led when no one was watching, without power, without recognition, without reward. That's true leadership, Aria." His words touched something deep inside me. A part that always knew my classification as Omega was unjust, but never had the courage to question it. "Rest now," he said, standing. "I'll use the floor." "No," I protested, surprising us both. "The bed is enough for two if you don't mind." Something darkened his eyes. Not anger, but something equally dangerous. Desire, perhaps. "Are you sure?" I nodded, unable to verbalize what I was feeling. It wasn't just gratitude or fascination with the power he represented. It was something more primitive, more true. Kane hesitated only a moment before nodding. "Sleep against the wall. I'll stay on the outer side to protect you." I obeyed, settling into the narrow space. Kane lay beside me, carefully maintaining a respectful distance, though in such a small bed, that meant we were almost touching. "Sleep," he repeated, his warm breath caressing my forehead. "I'll wake you when it's time." I closed my eyes, certain I wouldn't be able to sleep with him so close. But the exhaustion of the last days was stronger than my nervousness, and soon I plunged into deep sleep. I dreamed of my grandmother. She was as in my last memories. White hair in a long braid, bright blue eyes despite her age, gnarled hands holding the same amulet that now hung around my neck. "The moon calls those who have its light within," she said, but her voice sounded strangely distant. "When he comes, you'll know. Who? Grandmother?" I asked in the dream. "The scarred alpha who sees beyond the surface. He seeks what others ignore." Her image began to dissipate like mist in the sun. "Wait!" I shouted. "What should I do? How do I know if I can trust him?" Her voice was just a whisper now. "The amulet knows. It always knew." I woke to a gentle touch on my shoulder. Kane was leaning over me, his face half hidden in the shadows of the now darkened room. Through the window, I could see the sun had set. "It's time," he said quietly. I sat up, still disoriented by the dream. The amulet around my neck seemed warmer than normal against my skin. "Something wrong?" Kane asked, noticing my expression. "A strange dream," I responded, touching the amulet instinctively. "With my grandmother." Something in his gaze changed. "Your grandmother told you about the amulet's significance, didn't she?" I frowned. "What do you mean?" He seemed about to say something important, but was interrupted by a soft knock on the door. In one fluid movement, he positioned himself protectively in front of me and signaled for me to stay quiet. "Who is it?" he asked, his voice low but authoritative. "Asher, my alpha. We have problems." Kane opened the door, revealing the white-haired warrior whose face, normally serene, was tense with worry. The hunters returned. Asher informed. Earlier than expected. At least 20 of them surrounding the inn. They're using bows with silver arrows. 2 victims already. My blood froze. "Humans?" Asher nodded grimly. The innkeeper tried to protest when they entered. His wife, too. I closed my eyes, feeling a wave of guilt. Those people were dead because of us. "It's not your fault," Kane said, as if reading my thoughts. "The hunters don't value human lives any more than ours. To them, they're just disposable pawns." "What do we do now?" I asked, fighting the rising panic. Kane looked at Asher. "Gather the others in the farthest back room." Silently. When Asher left, Kane turned to me. "The tunnel you mentioned. Where's its exact entrance?" "Under the abandoned barn, about 200 meters from here. And the distance between this inn and the barn?" I visualized the path mentally. There's an alley in the back that leads to an open field, then a small pine forest, and then the barn. Kane nodded, his brain clearly processing strategies. "The open field is the problem. We'll be exposed. There's another option." I hesitated, uncertain if I should suggest it. "The rooftops. The houses are close enough for us to jump from one to another until we get close enough to the barn." His eyes lit up. "You know the rooftop path?" "Yes. I used to observe the village from above when I was younger. I didn't mention I did this because I was rarely welcome in the streets among humans. Smart and brave," he murmured almost to himself. "Every hour with you proves I wasn't wrong." I didn't have time to process the compliment. We quickly followed to the back room where the other warriors already waited for us. Rowan had a cut on his arm that smelled of silver. "Did you manage to see exactly how many there are?" Kane asked. 23, Rowan responded. "All armed with silver. They also have dogs, those trained specifically to hunt our kind." "We can't fight," Kane decided. Not in these conditions. We need to escape and return to clan territory. He quickly explained my rooftop plan. The warriors exchanged impressed looks. And after the barn? Asher asked. The tunnel leads directly beyond the village limits, I explained. It exits near the Blackwater River, which is frozen at this time of year. We can use it to cross quickly to the Northern Territory. Kane completed. Where we'll have terrain advantage. A noise on the lower floor interrupted our conversation. The heavy sound of boots climbing the stairs. The hunters were checking the rooms. Now, Kane ordered in a low voice. Moving silently as only predators can, we headed to the back window. Kane opened it, and the cold night air invaded the room. Outside, there was a small ledge that gave access to the roof. You first, Kane said to me. Guide the way. I swallowed my fear and climbed onto the sill. With an agility that surprised even me, I scaled to the inclined roof, finding support on the snow-covered tiles. The others followed me, moving with the supernatural grace of our species. From roof to roof, I guided the group through the sleeping village. Below, I could see the hunters moving through the streets with torches, their dogs sniffing the air. A shiver ran down my spine when one of the dogs stopped, raised its snout, and looked directly at the roof where we were. They caught our scent. Asher whispered, "Keep moving," Kane ordered. "Faster now." We accelerated our pace, sliding over the slippery tiles, jumping the spaces between houses. When the abandoned barn finally appeared ahead of us, a shout sounded behind us. "There! On the rooftops!" An arrow whistled through the air, passing so close to my head I felt the air displacement. A second arrow hit one of the warriors in the leg, making him stagger with a muffled cry of pain. "Run!" Kane shouted. We jumped from the last roof to the soft snow on the ground. The fall of almost 4 meters was absorbed by our supernaturally strong bodies. The wounded warrior, a man named Ren, was pale, the silver poison already spreading through his system. "Go!" He gasped. "I'll slow you down." "We don't leave anyone behind," Kane responded, lifting him as if he weighed nothing. We ran to the barn, whose rotten boards barely held against the wind. Inside, the smell of old straw and decaying wood dominated the environment. The trap door. I pointed to a dark corner. Under that pile of hay. Rowan and another warrior quickly removed the hay, revealing a square door in the floor. When they opened it, the smell of old tunnel and damp earth rose to us. "Quickly," I urged, hearing the hunters' shouts approaching. One by one, the warriors descended through the narrow opening. Kane, carrying Ren, was the second to last. "Come," he called from inside the tunnel. I looked one last time at the barn door, where shadows were already moving, and descended quickly, pulling the trapdoor over my head. The tunnel was low and narrow, forcing us to advance bent or crouched. The floor was packed earth, damp and slippery. In absolute darkness, I used my hands to feel the way, remembering my grandmother's instructions. "Always straight," I murmured, "until you feel the cold air current from the river." Behind us, we heard the hunters discovering the tunnel, their voices echoing distorted. But they were larger than us, slower in the confined space, and their dogs couldn't follow through the narrow tunnel. After what seemed like an eternity crawling in darkness, I felt the air change, colder, fresher, carrying the smell of ice and water. "We're arriving," I warned. Finally, the tunnel opened into a small natural chamber in the rock. A narrow stone staircase led to an opening above, covered with thick bushes. Kane was the first to climb, checking if it was safe before helping the others. We emerged about 100 meters from the bank of the Blackwater River, which ran wide and frozen under the starlit sky. The full moon illuminated the landscape with silver light, transforming the snow into a glittering carpet. "We made it," I breathed, barely believing. "Not yet," Kane responded, looking back. "They'll follow us as soon as they exit the tunnel. We need to cross the river before that." Carrying Ren, who was now unconscious, Kane led the way to the riverbank. The ice seemed solid enough, but we knew the dangers. Even with our supernatural strength, freezing water could kill us in minutes. "Spread out," he ordered. "Distribute the weight. Move quickly but carefully." We began the crossing, the ice cracking slightly under our feet. The opposite bank seemed very distant, at least 300 meters of exposed terrain, illuminated by the traitorous moon. We were halfway when the first shout sounded. The hunters had emerged from the tunnel and now ran in our direction, their dark silhouettes against the white snow. "Faster!" Kane shouted. We accelerated our pace, the ice groaning dangerously under our feet. A dull boom made us all freeze for a moment. The ice was beginning to crack in some spots. "Keep moving," Kane ordered. "Don't stop!" The whistling of an arrow cut the air, hitting the ice near my feet. The hunters had reached the bank and now shot, trying to bring us down before we reached safety. "They're too far for accurate aim," Rowan shouted. "Keep going!" A few more meters and we'd be on the opposite bank. The territory beyond belonged to the Pinewood clan, ancient allies of Kane's clan. There we would have some protection, at least temporarily. It was then that I heard the scream. I turned and saw Asher fallen on the ice, a silver arrow embedded in his back. Without thinking, I changed direction, running back to him. Kane shouted something, but the wind carried away his words. I reached Asher and saw the arrow had pierced near his heart. His face was contorted in pain, his skin already showing the dark veins characteristic of silver poisoning. "Leave me," he gasped. "Save yourself." I didn't respond. With strength I didn't know I possessed, I lifted Asher, passing his arm over my shoulders. He was much heavier than me, but something inside me, something primitive and fierce, gave me strength to support him. Step by step, I dragged him toward the bank, where the other warriors had already arrived and formed a defensive line. Kane had left Ren with them and ran in my direction, his expression a mixture of fury and fear. "What are you doing?" he shouted when he reached me. "You could have been killed. He's one of us." I responded simply, "Family." Something in his expression changed. Admiration, surprise, and something deeper, more powerful. Without words, he took Asher from me, lifting him easily. Together, we ran the last meters to the bank, arrows falling around us like metallic rain. When we finally stepped on solid ground, I looked back. The hunters were now on the ice, advancing cautiously. Their dogs growled and barked on the bank, reluctant to follow their masters over the treacherous surface. "They won't follow us through Pinewood Forest," Kane said. "Not in the dark. Even the hunters fear some things." "And Asher?" I asked, looking at the wounded warrior. "We need to remove the arrow and clean the poison," he responded, his gaze meeting mine. "Can you do this?" I nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility. For the second time in 2 days, the lives of Kane's warriors were in my hands. For the second time, the rejected Luna would need to prove her worth. But something had changed inside me. I was no longer just the Omega trying to survive. Now I was a wolf defending her newly found family. And that made all the difference. The village of Ravenwood emerged from the forest like a memory half forgotten. Rows of timber and stone cottages lined a muddy main street, smoke rising from chimneys into the gray afternoon sky. The smell of baking bread mixed with wood smoke and livestock, achingly familiar and yet alien to me now. I had been to human villages before, always on the edges, always invisible. But now I walked down the center of the street with Kane at my side and 11 warriors at our backs, and every human eye turned to watch. We must have looked strange to them. 12 men in ill-fitting clothes that strained across warrior builds, their movements too fluid, too predatory, despite attempts at human casualness. And me, a young woman with tangled blonde hair and a torn dress barely concealed beneath a cloak we had found in the abandoned cabin, walking among them like I belonged. Kane's hand found mine as we passed the first cluster of watching villagers. The gesture was calculated, I knew, part of our pilgrim story. Edmund and Elise, married travelers seeking St. William's blessing. But his grip was warm and steady, and I found myself drawing strength from it despite everything. "Stay close," he murmured, his voice pitched for my ears alone. "These are desperate times. Strangers aren't always welcome." A woman with a basket of turnips crossed herself as we passed. An old man spat in the dirt and muttered something that might have been a prayer or a curse. Children peeked from doorways with wide, curious eyes before their mothers pulled them back inside. The Golden Owl Inn stood at the center of the village, a 2-story structure with a worn wooden sign creaking in the wind. The owl carved into it had seen better days, its paint faded and chipped, but light glowed warm from the windows, and the promise of rest pulled at my exhausted body like a physical thing. Kane pushed open the door and we entered. The common room was half filled with locals nursing cups of ale, and travelers who looked as road-weary as we pretended to be. A fire crackled in a massive stone hearth, and the smell of stew made my stomach clench with sudden hunger. I couldn't remember the last time I had eaten anything more substantial than snow and the bitter herbs I had used for healing. A corpulent man in a stained apron looked up from behind a scarred wooden counter. His eyes swept over us with the practiced assessment of an innkeeper who had learned to judge travelers by their coin and their danger in equal measure. "What do you want, strangers?" His voice carried across the common room, and I felt other conversations pause as ears turned toward us. Kane stepped forward, and I watched as his entire bearing changed. The Alpha King who could command hundreds with a glance became Edmund the Pilgrim. His shoulders rounded slightly, his voice softened, his eyes dropped in deference that must have cost him something to perform. "Good afternoon, sir. We are pilgrims traveling to the shrine of St. William in the northern mountains. I am Edmund, and this is my wife Elise. These are our companions in faith. We were set upon by bandits 3 days past. They took our horses, most of our supplies, and left us for dead. We seek only shelter for the night and perhaps a hot meal. We can pay." The innkeeper's expression shifted slightly at the mention of payment. Silver, I had learned long ago, spoke louder than any words. "Bandits, aye. Been a plague of them in these parts." The man made the sign of the cross again, a gesture I noticed many humans performed when speaking of troubles. "You're not the first to come through with such tales. The roads grow more dangerous by the day." He named a price for rooms and meals that seemed high to me, but Kane produced coins from the pouch at his neck without haggling. The innkeeper's eyes gleamed at the sight of silver, and his manner warmed considerably. "You'll want 3 rooms, then, for your party, and hot water for washing if you've the coin for it. We'll take all you offer," Kane said. As the innkeeper called for his daughter to prepare the rooms, I became aware of the attention we were drawing from the other patrons. A group of merchants in the corner whispered among themselves, their eyes lingering on our warriors with expressions I couldn't quite read. 2 local men at the bar turned away too quickly when I glanced their direction. Something felt wrong. The air in the common room was too thick, too watchful. I moved closer to Kane, and he must have sensed my unease because his hand found the small of my back, a gesture of protection disguised as affection. "Come," he said quietly. "Let's sit and eat. We've done nothing wrong. We're just travelers seeking rest." But even as we moved to a long table near the fireplace, and the innkeeper's daughter brought wooden bowls of thick stew and dark bread, I couldn't shake the feeling of eyes upon us. The merchants continued their whispered conversation. The local men at the bar paid their tab and left with backward glances, and the innkeeper himself seemed nervous, his hands trembling slightly as he wiped down the counter again and again. Rowan leaned close as we ate. "We're being watched." His voice was barely a breath. 2 men just left. They'll be reporting to someone." "I know." Kane's response was equally quiet. "We rest here tonight as planned, post watches and shifts. If trouble comes, we leave through the back." Asher, his face still pale from blood loss despite my healing, spoke up. "The horse is in the stable. If we need to run, we'll need mounts. Stealing horses from humans will bring more trouble than it's worth." Kane's tone was final. "We go on foot if we must. The clan territory is only 2 days of hard travel from here. We can make it." I ate the stew mechanically, barely tasting it despite my hunger. My mind was racing through possibilities, through escape routes and contingency plans that my grandmother had taught me to always maintain. "When you're powerless," she had said, "you must always think 3 steps ahead. Always have a way out." The afternoon faded into evening, and more villagers came into the common room. The innkeeper served ale and stew, and the noise level rose with drink and conversation. But still that watchful feeling persisted, like an itch between my shoulder blades that I couldn't scratch. It was full dark when the door opened, and 3 men entered. They wore dark traveling cloaks, well made but plain, and moved with a purpose that set them apart from the other patrons. The innkeeper's reaction was immediate and unmistakable. He paled, wiped his hands on his apron, and hurried forward with an obsequiousness that spoke of fear more than respect. "Father Benedict," he said, his voice carrying clearly in the suddenly quiet room. "This is an honor. How may I serve you?" My blood turned to ice. Father Benedict. The name meant nothing to me, but the way Cain had gone absolutely still beside me told me everything I needed to know. These were not simple priests or travelers. These were silver hunters. The oldest of the three men pushed back his hood, revealing a weathered face with gray hair and eyes like chips of winter ice. He was perhaps 55, with the bearing of a military commander disguised in religious robes. When he smiled, it was the smile of a wolf who had cornered its prey. "We seek information, good innkeeper." His voice was cultured, educated, with an accent that spoke of cities far from this rural village. "We hunt dangerous criminals who have escaped the justice of the church. A group of men, large and unusually strong, possibly accompanied by a young woman with blonde hair." My hand, resting on the table, began to tremble. Cain's hand covered mine, squeezing once in warning or reassurance. The innkeeper's eyes flickered toward our table so briefly that anyone not watching for it might have missed it. But Father Benedict caught it. Of course he did. Men like him were trained to catch such tells. You've seen them. It wasn't a question. The hunter's gaze swept the common room and landed on us with the weight of a falling stone. "Well, how fortunate." He crossed the room slowly, his two companions flanking him like well-trained hounds. The other patrons shrank back, creating space, and I realized with a sinking heart that everyone in this room knew what these men were, and everyone was too afraid to interfere. "Good evening, travelers." Father Benedict stopped at our table, looking down at us with those cold, calculating eyes. "I am Father Benedict, servant of the church and hunter of those who would harm God's children. And who might you be?" Cain stood slowly, forcing the hunter to look up at him despite the older man's attempt at intimidation through positioning. "I am Edmund, a simple pilgrim. This is my wife, Elise. We travel to St. William's Shrine with our companions. We've done nothing to draw the attention of the church. Simple pilgrims," Benedict repeated, and there was amusement in his voice. "How interesting. Tell me, simple Edmund, do all pilgrims travel with such well-muscled companions? Do their wives wear such unusual jewelry?" His gaze had fixed on the pendant at my throat. I had forgotten to hide it beneath my dress. The silver moon caught the firelight, seeming to glow with its own internal luminescence. "It's a family heirloom," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "From my grandmother. It has no value beyond sentiment. Does it not?" Benedict leaned closer, and I caught the scent of silver and something else. Something metallic and wrong that made my wolf instincts scream danger. "You see, I've spent many years studying symbols of power, and that particular symbol is quite rare, quite dangerous in fact. It belonged to a bloodline that the church worked very hard to eliminate, for the good of all humanity, you understand." My heart hammered against my ribs. He knew. Somehow, this hunter knew what I was before I had even fully understood it myself. "I don't know what you're talking about," I whispered. "Don't you?" His smile widened. "Then perhaps you'd be willing to remove the pendant and let me examine it, just to ease an old man's curiosity." Cain's body was coiled like a spring beside me, ready to explode into violence. I could feel the other warriors positioning themselves around the room, preparing for a fight that would end with death on all sides. "I think not," Cain said, his voice dropping into a register that vibrated with barely controlled alpha command. "My wife's jewelry is her own business. We've answered your questions. We're simple travelers who've had a difficult journey. Nothing more." Benedict straightened, never taking his eyes from the pendant. "Of course. Forgive an old man's paranoia. These are dangerous times, and we must be vigilant against evil wherever it might hide." He turned as if to leave, then paused. "Oh, I nearly forgot. If you should happen to see any suspicious individuals, any groups of large men traveling with unusual haste, the church offers a substantial reward for information, silver enough to make a poor pilgrim quite comfortable. The offer hung in the air like poison. Around the room, I saw calculation in the eyes of the other patrons. How much would they sell us for? How desperate were they? "We'll keep our eyes open," Kane said flatly. "I'm certain you will." Benedict nodded to the innkeeper. "We'll take rooms as well. It seems this inn has become quite popular tonight. Perhaps we'll have another chance to speak in the morning." As the three hunters moved toward the stairs, their black cloaks swirling behind them, the common room slowly returned to normal volume. But the tension remained, thick enough to choke on. The innkeeper approached our table, his face pale and sweating despite the cool air. "Please," he whispered, "you need to leave. Tonight. They'll be watching, but if you go now, you might have a chance. They came yesterday asking about strangers. I had no choice but to tell them. They threatened my family, my children." I looked at the man and saw genuine terror in his eyes. He wasn't evil, just human and frightened and caught between forces he couldn't control. "We understand." Kane's voice had softened slightly. "We'll need a way out. The back door, perhaps?" The innkeeper shook his head. "They'll have men watching all the obvious exits. But there's an old way, through the rooftops. The buildings in this part of the village connect. You can travel across them to the northern edge, to the old barn. From there's a tunnel. Smugglers used it during the border wars. It comes out beyond the village walls, near the frozen river." "How do you know this?" I asked. The innkeeper's eyes found mine, and in them I saw recognition of something. "Your grandmother, Celine. She knew my father, traded with him for years. She told him secrets, taught him about the old ways. Before she died, she said that one day someone might come who needed the smuggler's path, someone with moon-blessed hair and a heart that chose healing over harm. I think she meant you." The words struck me like a physical blow. My grandmother had prepared for this. Even in death, she was still protecting me, still laying paths for my feet to follow. "Thank you," I managed to say past the tightness in my throat, "for honoring her memory. She was kind to my father when no one else was, to an Omega child who had nothing. I don't forget kindness. Now go. The rooms are ready, but don't stay in them long. Wait until full dark, then move. I'll leave the attic access unlocked." As we climbed the stairs to our assigned rooms, my mind was already racing ahead to what came next. The rooftops would be exposed, dangerous. The hunters would surely have watchers. And if we were caught in the open, there would be no escape. Kane pulled me into the room we were meant to share, closing the door firmly behind us. The space was small, dominated by a narrow bed and a single window that looked out over the village. The other warriors filed into adjacent rooms, and I could hear the soft murmur of their voices through the thin walls as they planned. "We have perhaps 3 hours until the moon is high enough for the rooftop crossing." Kane moved to the window, studying the layout of buildings. "The innkeeper's information is good. I can see the path from here, but it will be exposed. If they have archers. Then we move fast." I joined him at the window, tracing the route with my eyes. Building to building, using the shadows. "It's maybe 200 meters to the barn. You shouldn't come." Kane turned to face me, his expression grave. "You should hide here. Let us draw them off. We can circle back for you once we've lost them." "No." The word came out more forcefully than I intended. "I won't be separated from you. And besides, I'm the one they want. If I'm not with you, they'll tear this village apart looking for me. The innkeeper's family will pay the price." Kane's jaw clenched, and I saw the war playing out behind his eyes. The alpha in him wanted to protect me, to keep me safe at any cost. But he also understood strategy, understood that sometimes the safest path was the most dangerous one. "Then stay close to me," he said finally. "If fighting starts, you run. Don't look back. Head north to the clan territory. Tell them what happened. They'll send warriors to extract us. I won't leave you. You will if I order it." His voice had gone hard, alpha command bleeding through despite his attempt to soften it. "I can't lead if I'm worried about protecting you every moment. Promise me, Aria. If it comes to it, you run." I wanted to argue, to refuse, but I also understood the weight he carried. He was responsible for 12 lives, not just his own. And I was a liability, untrained in combat, unfamiliar with the tactics they would need to survive. "I promise," I said quietly, "but only if there's no other choice." He nodded, then surprised me by pulling me close, his forehead resting against mine in that intimate gesture that wolves used only with true mates. "We'll get through this," he murmured. "And when we do, when we're safe in Blackwood territory, there are things I need to tell you about what you are, about why the hunters want you so badly." "Tell me now," I whispered. "I need to understand." Kane pulled back slightly, his amber eyes searching my face. "Your grandmother, Celine. She was Lunari, the last of a bloodline that the church tried to exterminate 200 years ago. The word hung between us, heavy with meaning I didn't quite grasp. What's a Lunari?" "Healers blessed by the moon goddess." His voice dropped even lower, barely audible. "They could draw power from moonlight itself, heal wounds that should be fatal, even sense futures before they happened. They were counselors to alphas for generations. But the hunters discovered that Lunari blood could be used to forge weapons deadly to our kind, so they hunted them, slaughtered entire families. By the time the wolf clans organized to defend them, it was too late. Everyone thought the bloodline was extinct, until my grandmother, until Celine, who hid what she was, changed her name, her history, married into a minor wolf family, and kept her gifts secret." Kane's hand came up to cup my face. "My father knew. He swore an oath to protect her, and when you were born, to protect you as well, by making me Omega." The pieces were falling into place now, a puzzle I hadn't known I was solving. By making me so low that no one would look at me, no one would see what I really was, hidden in plain sight. Kane confirmed, "It kept you safe. But now they know." Or at least Benedict suspects. "That pendant, the way your hands glowed when you healed Asher and Ren. The hunters have been watching for signs of Lunari for 2 centuries. They won't let you go easily." A knock on the door interrupted us. Rowan's voice came through, low and urgent. "My Alpha, the hunters are moving. 2 of them just left the inn. They're positioning men around the village perimeter." Kane's expression hardened. "Then we move now, before they complete the circle." He opened the door to find not just Rowan but all 11 warriors crammed into the narrow hallway. Their faces were grim but determined, and I saw no fear in their eyes. These were men who had faced death before and would do so again without hesitation. "Listen carefully." Kane's voice carried the weight of command. "We go through the attic, across the rooftops to the northern barn. Stay low, stay quiet. If we're spotted, we don't engage unless absolutely necessary. Our goal is escape, not glory." "Not. Rowan, you take point. Asher, despite your wounds, I need you watching our rear. The rest of you, protect Aria at all costs. She's the primary target. Understood?" A chorus of quiet affirmations answered him. "And if we're separated?" Asher asked. "Rally Point is the old Standing Stones, 3 kilometers north of here. You all know them. If we can't regroup there by dawn, make for the clan territory independently. Warn them about the hunters." The warriors nodded, and I saw the trust they had in Kane's leadership. They would follow him into death if he asked it. The responsibility of that trust sat visibly on his shoulders. We moved as one unit through the inn, climbing a narrow servant's stair to the attic. The innkeeper had been true to his word. The access door stood unlocked, revealing a dusty space filled with stored goods and forgotten furniture. A small window at the far end looked out over the rooftops. Kane was first through the window, testing the roof tiles with careful steps. They held his weight, and he gestured for the rest of us to follow. One by one, the warriors climbed out into the night air, their movements silent despite their size. I was last, and as I pulled myself through the window frame, I looked back at the warm interior of the inn one final time. Part of me wanted to stay, to hide in that dusty attic and hope the hunters would pass us by. But I knew that was a child's wish. There was no hiding from what was coming. There was only forward, into danger and darkness, with wolves who had chosen to protect me for reasons I still didn't fully understand. The rooftop was treacherous with ice and snow. The tiles were old, some cracked or missing entirely. But the moon was bright, illuminating our path with silver light that felt both blessing and curse. We could see, but we could also be seen. Kane led us across the first gap, a meter-wide space between buildings that looked down into a dark alley 3 stories below. He jumped it easily, landing in a crouch on the opposite roof. The warriors followed, their movements fluid despite the danger. When it was my turn, I hesitated. The gap looked impossibly wide, the drop impossibly far. But Rowan was behind me, and I could hear voices from the street below, hunters calling to each other as they positioned their forces. "Jump!" Kane's voice came across the space, firm and certain. "I'll catch you." I jumped. For a moment I was airborne, suspended between rooftops with nothing but darkness below. Then Kane's hands caught me, his grip iron-strong, pulling me against him as we landed together. His arms wrapped around me briefly, and I felt his heart hammering as fast as mine. "Good," he murmured. "Keep moving." We traversed 4 more buildings, each gap a test of nerve and skill. The warriors moved like shadows, their training evident in every step. But I knew we were leaving tracks in the snow, a trail that any competent tracker could follow. We were halfway to the barn when I heard it, a shout from below, sharp with alarm. Then the unmistakable sound of a bowstring releasing. "Down!" Kane's roar came a heartbeat before the arrow whistled past my head. We scattered across the rooftop as more arrows followed. I saw one strike the tiles near Cormac's foot, the silver tip gleaming in the moonlight. Another hit Rowan's shoulder, and he grunted but kept moving, the wound already beginning to heal with supernatural speed. "They've spotted us! Move! Move!" Kane was pulling me toward the edge of the roof, toward the next gap. This one was wider, nearly 2 meters, and beyond it was the steep pitch of a barn roof. "We have to jump together," he said, his voice urgent. "On 3. 1, 2, 3. We launched ourselves into space. For a terrifying moment I thought we wouldn't make it. The gap seemed to widen beneath us, the ground rushing up. Then we hit the barn roof, sliding down the steep pitch in a controlled fall. Kane's arms never left me, cushioning my impact as we rolled together. The other warriors were jumping now, arrows falling around them like deadly rain. I saw Asher take one in the leg, saw him falter but keep running. Another warrior, a quiet man named Wren, was hit in the shoulder but pulled the arrow free even as he moved. "The barn," I gasped, pointing to the structure below us. "The innkeeper said there's access from the roof." Kane nodded, and we scrambled across the tiles, searching for the entrance. Below us, I could hear the hunters mobilizing, their boots pounding on cobblestones as they raced to cut off our escape. "There!" Rowan called out, despite the arrow protruding from his shoulder. A trap door, hidden beneath an overhanging section of roof. We pried it open and dropped into the barn's dark interior one by one. The smell of old hay and animal musk surrounded us. Moonlight filtered through cracks in the walls, providing just enough light to see by. The tunnel. Kane's voice was urgent. "Where is it?" I searched my memory of what the innkeeper had told us. Under the north corner, beneath the hay. We dug frantically, pulling aside moldy hay to reveal wooden floorboards, and there, beneath a layer of dirt and time, was a trap door. Kane wrenched it open, revealing a narrow stone staircase descending into darkness. "Go!" he ordered. "All of you. Now!" "What about you?" I asked, even as the warriors began filing down into the tunnel. "I'm coming, but someone needs to seal the entrance after we're through." Kane pulled me close, his eyes intense. "Remember your promise. If I don't make it, you run. You get to the clan territory and you tell them everything. You'll make it," I said fiercely. "We both will." A crash from the barn doors told us we were out of time. The hunters had reached us. "Go!" Kane shoved me toward the opening. I stumbled down the stairs into darkness, the warriors crowding in behind me. Above, I heard Kane drop the trapdoor back into place, then the sound of hay being scattered over it. His footsteps pounded across the barn floor. Then the barn doors exploded inward, and Father Benedict's voice rang out, amplified by fury. "I know you're in here, wolves. There's nowhere left to run. Surrender the Lunari girl, and the rest of you may live. Resist, and you all burn." Silence answered him. In the darkness of the tunnel, we held our breaths. I heard footsteps above, slow and deliberate. The hunters were searching, prodding at hay piles with their weapons. Any moment now they would find the trap door. Then I heard Kane's voice, coming from the far end of the barn. He had positioned himself away from our hiding spot, drawing their attention. If you want her, you'll have to go through me first." The sound of combat erupted, roars and crashes, the distinctive scent of alpha power being unleashed. Cain was fighting them, all of them, to give us time to escape. We have to help him. I started back up the stairs, but Rowan's hand caught my arm. "No." His voice was gentle but firm. "He's alpha. This is his choice. He's buying us time. We can't waste it. I can't leave him to die. He's not planning to die." Rowan's eyes glowed in the darkness, reflecting what little light filtered down. "He's planning to survive long enough for us to get clear. Then he'll run. He's faster than any of us, but only if we're not here slowing him down." The logic was sound, but everything in me rebelled against it. Running felt like cowardice. Running felt like abandoning family. But Cain had made me promise. The sounds of fighting above intensified. I heard Cain's roar of pain, heard the clang of silver weapons against walls. And beneath it all, Father Benedict's voice, cold and calculating, directing his hunters like pieces on a chessboard. "Move," I said, hating myself for the word. "We move now." We ran through the tunnel, our hands trailing along damp stone walls for guidance. The passage was narrow, forcing us to move single file. Water dripped from the ceiling, and the air smelled of earth and age. This tunnel had been here for decades at least, maybe longer, built by smugglers or rebels or those who needed to move unseen through a dangerous world. Like us. The tunnel seemed endless, stretching on through darkness. My lungs burned, my legs ached, but I didn't slow. Behind us, the sounds of combat had faded to silence. I didn't know if that meant Cain had escaped or if something worse had happened. I pushed the thought away. He was alpha. He was strong. He would survive. He had to survive. Finally, after what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, I saw light ahead. Not the warm glow of firelight, but the cold silver of moonlight. The tunnel's exit. We emerged into the winter night near the banks of a frozen river. The Blackwater, it had to be. I recognized the shape of the mountains on the far shore, remembered my grandmother pointing them out to me as a child. Beyond those peaks lay Blackwood territory, safety, home. But between us and safety lay 300 meters of exposed ice under a full moon. We would be completely visible to anyone watching from the village. We spread out. Rowan ordered, taking command in Cain's absence. "Distribute weight. Move quickly but carefully. If the ice breaks, we all die." The warriors nodded and began the crossing, spacing themselves out across the frozen surface. I followed, my feet sliding on the slick ice. Each step was a gamble, each moment an eternity. The cold bit through my thin clothing, and I could see my breath fogging in the air. We were halfway across when I heard the shout from behind us. Looking back, I saw figures pouring from the village. Hunters, at least 20 of them, with Father Benedict's distinctive silhouette at their head. And with them, held between two hunters with silver chains around his wrists, was Cain. They had captured him. While buying us time to escape, they had taken him. No. The word tore from my throat. No, no, no. Keep moving. Asher's hand on my shoulder was gentle but insistent. There's nothing we can do for him now, but I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Watching the hunters drag Cain toward the riverbank, seeing him struggle against the chains that burned his skin, knowing they had him because he had sacrificed himself for us, for me. Aria. Rowan's voice cut through my paralysis. Listen to me. The Alpha's last order was to get you to safety. If we stop now, if we let them take you too, then his sacrifice means nothing. Do you understand? I understood, but understanding didn't make it hurt less. The hunters had reached the riverbank now. Father Benedict stepped forward, his voice carrying clearly across the ice. You have something that belongs to the church, girl, something that was supposed to be destroyed 200 years ago. Give yourself up, and the Alpha lives. Run, and I'll kill him here and now. To prove his point, one of his men raised a silver blade to Cain's throat. Don't! Cain's voice rang out, raw and commanding even in chains. Don't you dare, Aria. Run. Get to safety. That's an order from your Alpha. But his eyes, meeting mine across the distance, said something else entirely. They said goodbye. They said he was sorry. They said that in another life, in another world, things might have been different between us. I felt something break inside my chest, something that had been holding back a power I didn't fully understand. The moon pendant at my throat grew hot, then burning hot, then so hot I should have been screaming, but instead of pain I felt power. Silver blue light exploded from the pendant, from my hands, from my very skin. It spread across the ice like fire, racing toward both shores. The hunters cried out, shielding their eyes. Cain staggered as the chains around his wrists shattered, the silver unable to hold against the tide of Lunari power. The ice beneath my feet began to crack, not from weakness, but from the sheer energy pouring through it. Fissures spread in geometric patterns, beautiful and terrible. "What's happening?" I gasped. "You're manifesting." Rowan's voice was odd. Full Lunari manifestation under the moon. "I've only seen it once before, when your grandmother saved an entire pack from plague. Aria, you need to control it, or you'll kill us all." But I didn't know how to control it. The power was too much, too vast. It wanted to heal everything, protect everyone, destroy anything that threatened those I had claimed as mine. Cain. I focused on him, on his face across the ice, on the burns the silver chains had left on his wrists. "Heal him. Please, let me heal him." The light pulsed once, twice, then streamed across the ice toward Cain like a living thing. It wrapped around him, and I saw the burns on his wrists fade, saw color return to his face, saw strength flow back into his limbs. The hunters scattered as the light touched them, crying out in pain or fear. But it didn't harm them. It simply pushed, like a great invisible hand sweeping them back from the riverbank. "Run!" I screamed to Cain. "Run now!" He didn't hesitate. In one fluid motion he shifted, clothes tearing away as his wolf form emerged. The great gray wolf with the scarred muzzle that I had first met in the cave. He ran across the ice toward us, faster than any human could follow, faster than arrows could fly. The ice cracked behind him, the power I had unleashed destabilizing the frozen surface. Water began to well up through the fissures, dark and deadly cold. "Move!" Asher shouted. "All of us, move!" We ran for the opposite shore, Cain's wolf form racing ahead. Behind us, I heard the hunters attempting to cross, heard their screams as the ice gave way beneath them. I tried not to think about drowning men, about cold water closing over desperate faces. But I had made a choice. I had chosen my pack over strangers who wanted to kill us. The choice hurt, but I would make it again. We reached the far shore and scrambled up the snowy bank, the warriors helping each other climb. Cain's wolf form bounded ahead, then shifted back to human, unconcerned with his nakedness in the urgency of the moment. "Into the trees," he ordered, his voice rough from the chains and transformation. "They'll regroup and follow. We need to put distance between us." We plunged into the pinewood forest, the ancient trees swallowing us in their shadows. Behind us, the sounds of pursuit faded as the hunters dealt with their wounded and their broken crossing. But I knew this wasn't over. Father Benedict had seen what I could do, had seen the full manifestation of Lunari power that shouldn't exist anymore. He wouldn't stop hunting me now. Not ever. As we ran through the forest, Cain fell back to run beside me. His eyes glowed amber in the darkness, and when he spoke, his voice carried a weight I had never heard before. "What you did back there, the power you showed. That wasn't just healing, Aria. That was raw Lunari magic, the kind that hasn't been seen in 2 centuries. You saved us all, but you also showed them exactly what you are." "I know." My chest heaved with exertion, the cold air burning my lungs. "I'm sorry. I couldn't let them kill you. I couldn't. Don't be sorry." His hand found mine in the darkness, squeezed once. "You did what you had to do, what any Luna would do for her alpha." The word hung between us. Luna. Not just a title given in a moment of crisis, but a role I was growing into with every step, every choice, every manifestation of power I didn't yet understand. We ran through the night, putting distance between ourselves and the shattered river crossing. And as dawn began to lighten the eastern sky, turning the pinewood forest from black to gray to gold, I realized something fundamental had changed. I was no longer running from what I was. I was running toward it, toward understanding, toward power, toward a destiny that my grandmother had prepared me for without my knowing. The winter luna was rising, and nothing would ever be the same. The ancient pinewood forest rose before us like cathedral walls, towering pines that had witnessed centuries of wolf history. Their branches formed a canopy so dense that even the full moon's light struggled to penetrate, creating a world of shadows and silver-edged darkness. We moved quickly but carefully, Cain leading the way with the unconscious wren still cradled in his arms, while I helped support Asher, whose breathing had become shallow and labored. Every step Asher took sent tremors through his body. The silver poison was spreading faster than I had hoped, dark veins now visible along his neck and creeping toward his face. I could feel the fever radiating from his skin, even through our layered clothing. "We need to stop," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, but carrying clearly in the forest silence. "He won't survive much longer without treatment." Cain's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "There's a hollow up ahead, a place my father used to bring me when I was young. We can rest there for a few hours." The hollow turned out to be a natural depression in the earth, surrounded by massive pine roots that formed almost a protective barrier. The ground was covered in thick layers of fallen needles that provided some insulation from the frozen earth below. As soon as we arrived, the warriors formed a defensive perimeter without needing orders, their military training evident in every movement. Cain carefully laid Wren on the softest patch of ground he could find, then turned to help me with Asher. The white-haired warrior had gone completely limp, his weight now dead weight that took both of us to lower gently beside Wren. I knelt between the two wounded men, my hands already reaching for the small pouch of remaining herbs I had managed to save from our escape. It wasn't much. Most of my supplies had been left behind in the cave or used in the initial healing. What remained was barely enough for one serious wound, let alone two. Rowan crouched beside me, his dark face creased with worry. "How bad is it?" I examined Asher's wound first, gently probing around the arrow shaft that still protruded from his back. The arrow had entered at an angle, missing his heart by mere inches, but the silver had been inside him for over an hour now. His body was fighting a losing battle against the poison. "The arrow needs to come out," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "But if I pull it straight back, it will tear through muscle and spread more poison. I need to push it through, out the front." Cain's hand landed on my shoulder, warm and steady. "What do you need?" "Light. More light than we have. I need to see exactly where the tip is, or I could push it through his lung or heart." Rowan was already gathering dry pine needles and small branches. "We'll risk a small fire, just enough for you to work by." While the warriors prepared the fire, I turned to Wren. His wound was different, a gash in his thigh where a silver blade had caught him during the rooftop chase. The bleeding had mostly stopped, but the flesh around the wound was already turning black. "This one I can handle more easily," I said, mostly to reassure myself. "The poison hasn't spread as far. But I need water. Clean water. There's a stream about 200 paces east. One of the warriors, a lean man named Cormac, volunteered immediately. I'll fetch it." As Cormac disappeared into the darkness, Rowan got the fire started. It was barely more than a handful of flames, but it cast enough flickering light for me to see by. I positioned myself behind Asher, studying the arrow's angle with intense concentration. Cain knelt across from me, his amber eyes reflecting the firelight. "Tell me what to do." "Hold him," I instructed. "When I push this through, the pain will be incredible. Even unconscious, his body will try to fight." Cain positioned himself, one hand on Asher's shoulder, the other braced against his chest. The other warriors moved closer, ready to help restrain their brother if needed. I placed my hands on the arrow shaft, feeling its terrible coldness even through the wooden surface. Silver poisoned not just flesh, but the very essence of what we were. Every instinct screamed at me to pull away from it, but I forced my hands to remain steady. "Forgive me, Asher," I whispered, then pushed. The arrow moved slowly, agonizingly, through resistant flesh and muscle. Asher's body convulsed despite Cain's hold, a strangled scream escaping his throat even in unconsciousness. Blood welled around the wound, hot and dark in the firelight. "Keep going," Cain's voice was strained. "You're doing well." I felt the moment the tip broke through the front of Asher's shoulder, the resistance suddenly giving way. With careful fingers, I gripped the bloody arrowhead and pulled it the rest of the way through, finally freeing his body from the silver's presence. The arrow clattered to the ground, and I immediately pressed my hands against both wounds, front and back, trying to slow the bleeding. The flesh was hot beneath my palms, fever hot, and getting hotter. That's when it happened. My hands began to glow with that same silver blue light I had seen when I pulled Cain from the frozen river. But this time, I understood what it meant. This wasn't fear or confusion I felt, but recognition. My grandmother's blood, the Lunari gift she had hidden so carefully, was finally awakening fully within me. The light pulsed in rhythm with my heartbeat, growing brighter with each beat. I felt warmth flowing through my hands, different from the fever heat of Asher's wounds. This was cleaner, purer, like moonlight made tangible, and where that warmth touched, I could feel the poison retreating. Beneath my glowing palms, Asher's wounds began to close. Not completely, not like some miracle from ancient stories, but faster than any natural healing. The blackened veins receded, the fever heat diminished, and his breathing, so shallow and desperate before, began to deepen and steady. "Don't stop." Cain's voice cut through my concentration. "Whatever you're doing, don't stop." I looked down at Ren, saw his pain-twisted face, and moved my still glowing hands to his thigh wound. The silver poison in his leg fought against the light, a cold darkness trying to resist. But gradually, inevitably, it gave way. When the glow finally faded, I swayed with sudden exhaustion. Cain caught me before I could fall, his strong arms wrapping around me. "Easy," he murmured, his voice close to my ear. "You've done enough. Rest now." Cormac returned with water in a makeshift container fashioned from large bark, and I used it to clean the wounds properly, applying what little remained of my herbs. By the time I finished, the first hints of dawn were beginning to lighten the eastern sky. "We need to keep moving," Cain announced to the group. "We're still too close to the hunters. Cormac, Rowan, you'll help Ren and Asher walk. They're stable enough now. The rest of you stay alert. We're not safe until we cross into Blackwood territory." "And how far is that?" I asked, my voice heavy with fatigue. 6 hours of hard travel." Cain's eyes met mine. "Can you make it?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. In truth, I felt like I could collapse at any moment. Whatever power had flowed through me during the healing had taken something vital with it when it left. But I would not slow us down, not when we were so close to safety. We moved through the forest as the sun climbed higher, painting the snow-covered world in shades of gold and rose. The beauty of it felt surreal, disconnected from the desperation of our situation. Birds sang their morning songs, oblivious to the drama of hunted and hunters playing out beneath their branches. Cain stayed close to me, his presence both protective and questioning. After we had been walking for perhaps 2 hours, when the others had moved ahead slightly, he fell into step beside me, his voice low enough that only I could hear. "Your grandmother never told you, did she, about what you are?" "I'm Omega," I responded automatically, though the classification felt increasingly hollow even as I said it. "No." His voice was gentle but firm. "You were hidden as Omega. There's a difference. Your grandmother Celine was Lunari, the last of an ancient bloodline that the Silver Hunters tried to exterminate 200 years ago." The word meant nothing to me, yet hearing it sent a shiver down my spine. "What's a Lunari?" "Healers blessed by the moon itself. They could draw power from moonlight, heal wounds that should be fatal, even sense futures before they happened. For generations they served as counselors to the Alpha lines." Cain's expression darkened. "Until the hunters discovered that Lunari blood could be used to forge weapons deadly to our kind. They slaughtered entire families. By the time we organized a defense, it was too late. Everyone thought the bloodline was extinct, but my grandmother survived by hiding. She changed her name, her history, married into a minor family line, and kept her gifts secret." Cain glanced at me. "My father knew what she was. He swore an oath to protect her, and when you were born, to protect you as well. By classifying you as Omega, you became invisible, hidden in plain sight." I stopped walking, forcing Cain to stop as well. My whole life was a lie. It was protection. Kane's hand came up to touch my face. She watched you grow strong despite hardship. She taught you compassion when cruelty would have been easier. Those aren't lessons for someone worthless, Aria. Those are lessons for someone being prepared for something greater. His words struck deep, but before I could respond, Rowan called back. My Alpha, we're approaching the border. Within half an hour, the forest began to change subtly. There were markers, claw scratches on certain trunks, the scent of border patrols. We were entering Blackwood territory. 3 wolves in animal form materialized from the trees ahead. When they saw Kane, they immediately shifted to human form, revealing border guards in simple leather clothing. Alpha Kane, the eldest, a grizzled man named Marcus, showed visible relief. We received word you were attacked. The whole clan has been searching. Stand down the search, Kane ordered. Send runners ahead. Tell them to prepare the healer's house for wounded and summon the council. We're coming home. Marcus's eyes swept over our group and stopped entirely when they landed on me. His shock was almost comical. Is that Aria Moonwhisper? But she was exiled. She's with me. Kane's voice carried warning. She saved our lives, multiple times. Any questions can be directed to me personally. As the border guards ran ahead with Kane's messages, we continued into the heart of Blackwood territory. With each step, my anxiety grew. The last time I had walked these paths, I had been leaving in disgrace. Now I was returning. But as what? Kane's hand found mine, his grip firm. Remember, you're not alone anymore. Whatever happens, I'm with you. The village came into view as we crested a final hill. Smoke rose from dozens of chimneys, but as word of our approach spread, daily business ground to a halt. Wolves stopped and turned to watch. A crowd was already gathering near the main hall. The crowd parted as we entered, creating a corridor that led straight to the great hall. I recognized so many faces. Elder Margot, the blind woman I had read to for years, stood near the front. Several orphaned pups I had cared for were being held back by their foster parents, their young faces showing excitement, but others watched with suspicion. Near the front stood a striking woman about my age with dark hair and proud bearing. Victoria Silverfang, daughter of Beta Marcus, who stood beside her with clear disapproval radiating from every line of his body. The council of elders was assembled on the steps, 5 ancient wolves whose faces revealed nothing. Kane stopped at the base of the steps, still holding my hand. The wounded were taken by healers who appeared at his signal. Now it was just Kane and me and the 12 warriors facing the assembled judgment of the entire clan. I have returned, Kane's voice carried across the crowd, and I bring with me your Luna. The response was immediate chaos. Gasps, shouts, questions, objections. Victoria's voice cut through. This is madness. She's Omega. How can you possibly make her Luna? Kane's eyes flashed gold. You dare question your Alpha's choice? I question the elevation of someone so clearly unsuited, Victoria shot back. She has no bloodline, no training, no strength. What hold does she have over you? The accusation sent a ripple of unease through the crowd. If others believed I had manipulated Kane through unnatural means, I would be cast out or killed. Before Kane could respond in anger, I squeezed his hand and stepped forward. You're right to question, I said, my voice steady despite my pounding heart. I was classified as Omega. I have no grand bloodline, no political alliances. By every traditional measure, I'm unsuitable. Victoria's expression turned triumphant, but I wasn't finished. But I would ask you, and all who stand in judgment, what makes someone suitable to be Luna? Is it strength in battle? Beauty? Bloodline? I turned slowly, making eye contact with as many wolves as I could. When Elder Margot took fever last winter, who brought her medicine daily? When the orphaned pups cried at night, who comforted them? When hunters returned wounded, who treated their injuries without asking for payment? The crowd quieted, listening despite themselves. I didn't do those things hoping to be noticed. I did them because that's what pack means. Family means caring for each other, not because of rank or reward, but because it's right. My hand went to the pendant at my throat, pulling it out so everyone could see. My grandmother Celine gave me this. She told me that true strength doesn't roar, it waits, that the moon calls those who have its light within. I'm only beginning to understand what she meant. The pendant caught the light strangely, gleaming brighter than it should. If Alpha Cain has chosen me, it's because he saw what you could have seen if you'd looked. Someone who serves without expectation. Someone who protects the vulnerable. Someone who understands that leadership means standing beside others, not above them. I turned back to Victoria. If you want to challenge my right, then challenge. By ancient right, any female may contest. I accept. The crowd erupted with excitement. A Luna challenge hadn't happened in Blackwood territory in over 50 years. Cain's hand gripped my shoulder. You don't have to do this. Yes, I do. I met his eyes. They need to see I earn this, not receive it by decree. A slow smile spread across Cain's scarred face. This is why I chose you. The eldest of the council stepped forward. A Luna challenge has been issued and accepted. Elder Thaddeus's voice carried absolute authority. By ancient law, there shall be 3 trials: trial of wisdom, trial of strength, and trial of heart. These trials begin at tomorrow's dawn. Does the challenger accept? Victoria hesitated. Then her father whispered something, and her expression hardened. I accept. Does the challenged accept? I accept. My voice didn't waver. Then it is settled. Both candidates will be housed separately until the trials begin. Cain caught my arm as the crowd began to disperse. His expression mixed pride with concern. You've thrown yourself into the fire. The trials won't be easy. I know, but it's the only way. If I hide behind your authority, I'll never truly be accepted. His hand cupped my cheek. You already proved yourself to me. Everything else is theater for them, but it's necessary theater. I leaned into his touch. This is what leadership means. Earning trust, not demanding it. The next morning dawned cold and clear. I had spent the night in a small room in the Elder's Lodge, alone with my thoughts. Now, standing in the center of the great hall with the entire clan assembled, I felt the weight of every eye upon me. The trial of wisdom will now begin, Thaddeus announced. 2 families of our clan have been in dispute for 3 months over hunting rights to the Eastern Valley. Luna candidates, you will each propose a solution. The clan will vote on which they find most wise. Representatives from the Thornback and Ravenwing families came forward, each telling their stories. The Thornbacks were a large family needing territory to feed many children. The Ravenwings were smaller but claimed ancestral rights dating back generations. When they finished, Thaddeus gestured to Victoria. Luna candidate Silverfang, present your solution. Victoria stepped forward confidently. The solution is simple. Hold a contest of strength between the families. The victors gain hunting rights for 1 year. This respects the strong and gives both families a fair chance. The crowd murmured appreciation. It was traditional, fitting with wolf culture's emphasis on strength. Luna candidate Moonwhisper. Thaddeus turned to me. Present your solution. I took a deep breath. The Eastern Valley is large enough for both families without depleting the game. What if both families hunt together? They share the territory and knowledge. The Thornbacks learn the Ravenwings' tracking methods refined over generations. The Ravenwings benefit from the Thornbacks' strength for larger prey. I turned to address the representatives directly. You're not enemies, you're pack. Pack is strongest when it works together, not against itself. Rotate hunting schedules, share proceeds, teach both families' children to work as one unit. In a generation, there won't be Thornback hunters and Ravenwing hunters. There will just be the finest hunters in Blackwood, carrying the best of both traditions. The hall fell silent. Then, slowly, the Thornback representative extended his hand to the Ravenwing representative. If this solution is chosen, we would accept it. Better to build bridges than walls. The Ravenwing representative gripped the offered hand. We accept as well. It honors our traditions while embracing the future. Thaddeus nodded. The clan will now vote by howl. Those who favor Luna candidate Silverfang's solution, make yourselves heard. Howls rose, strong and numerous. Those who favor Luna candidate Moonwhisper's solution. The howls that rose were deeper, more resonant. When the sound faded, it was clear my solution had won more support. The trial of wisdom goes to Luna candidate Moonwhisper. Victoria's face flushed with anger, but she kept her composure. 2 trials remain. That night I couldn't sleep, staring at the ceiling and wondering about the trial of strength. I had no combat training. Victoria had trained as a warrior since childhood. In any test of physical prowess, she would destroy me. But perhaps strength meant something different than what we had always assumed. The next morning proved me right. The trial of strength took place in the training grounds, a large open space at the village edge. The clan assembled in a circle around a marked combat ring. The trial of strength, Thaddeus announced. The candidates will face each other in combat, not to death, but to submission. This tests physical power, courage, and will. Victoria entered the ring dressed in light leather armor, clearly prepared. I entered wearing only a simple dress, feeling desperately vulnerable. Kane's eyes met mine, and I saw fear there mixed with trust. He gave me the slightest nod. Begin. Victoria moved immediately, her training evident. She didn't rush but advanced with controlled aggression. I backed away, keeping distance, observing. "Stand and fight, coward!" someone in the crowd shouted. But I wasn't being cowardly. I was thinking. Victoria was stronger, faster, better trained. The only advantage I had was unpredictability and refusal to play by expected rules. Victoria feinted left and struck right, her fist connecting with my shoulder hard enough to spin me around. Pain exploded through my arm, but I used the momentum to roll away, putting distance between us. "You can't run forever," Victoria growled, circling. She was right, but I could change the rules. I stopped retreating and stood still, facing her squarely. "Victoria," I called out loudly, "you're absolutely right. You're the better fighter. Stronger, faster, more skilled. In combat, you would defeat me every time." The crowd murmured in confusion. "But being Luna isn't about being the best fighter," I continued. "It's about knowing when to fight and when there's a better way. It's about protecting the pack, not proving dominance." I turned to address the crowd. "If I fight Victoria with all my strength, one of us will be seriously injured, maybe both. For what? To prove who can hurt the other more? How does that serve the pack?" I turned back to Victoria. "You've proven your strength. Everyone knows you're formidable. I acknowledge that freely. I submit to you in combat, not from weakness, but because I choose a different kind of strength." I walked toward her slowly, hands open. The strength to admit when someone is better at something. The strength to value the pack's well-being over personal pride. The strength to turn an enemy into an ally. I stopped directly before her and extended my hand. "Will you help me lead? The pack needs your warrior's strength and my healer's compassion. Together we could protect them better than either of us alone." Victoria stared, her weapon half raised, her face a mask of confusion. "This is manipulation," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "No trick." I kept my hand extended. "Just a choice. You can strike me down and prove your physical superiority, or you can make a different choice. To build instead of destroy. To unite instead of divide." For a long moment, Victoria didn't move. Then slowly she lowered her weapon. Even more slowly, she reached out and gripped my hand. The crowd erupted in noise. Thaddeus raised his hand for silence. "This is unprecedented. Never has a candidate submitted while still able to fight, because maybe the old ways don't serve us as well as we think." Elder Margot spoke up. "This child has shown wisdom beyond her years. She turned an enemy into an ally without bloodshed. She valued unity over victory. If that is not strength, I don't know what is." Another elder, stern-faced Brenna, shook her head. She conceded defeat. "By the rules, Luna candidate Silverfang is the victor." "But to what end?" Margot countered. "Look at them. They stand together now." "Is that not a greater victory?" The debate raged before Thaddeus raised his hand. "The council is divided. We declare this trial a draw. Both candidates showed strength of different kinds. The final trial will determine the outcome." As the crowd dispersed, Victoria pulled me aside. "Why did you do that? I would have won. You gave me victory." "No." I met her eyes. "I gave us both a different kind of victory. You can't lead through combat alone. I can't lead through healing alone. But together, Together we might succeed. She stared at me, then shook her head with something like wonder. You're not what I expected. Neither are you, I admitted. You could have struck me when I walked toward you unarmed, but you chose differently. My father is furious. She glanced toward where Beta Marcus stood with disapproving wolves. He thinks I've been made a fool. Let him think that. Sometimes wisdom looks foolish to those who only value force. That night, as I tried to sleep before the final trial, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. The air felt charged, like the moment before a storm. I was proven right when a howl of alarm split the night. "Silver hunters!" The cry went up. At the borders, dozens armed for war. I rushed from my room to find the village erupting into controlled chaos. Warriors assembling, weapons distributed, defensive positions organized. Through it all, one voice rose above the others, amplified by unnatural means. Cardinal Thorn's voice boomed. "Send out the Lunari heretic, and we'll spare your clan. Resist, and you all burn." Every eye turned to me. Some showed fear, others determination, but all understood what was being asked. Cain materialized beside me, already half-shifted, alpha power radiating like heat. We don't negotiate with hunters. We fight. 300 wolves against 80 armed hunters? I asked quietly. How many die? How many children lose parents? His eyes met mine, golden and fierce. I won't give you to them. The choice isn't yours, I said gently. It's mine. I turned to address the assembled clan, raising my voice. Cardinal Thorn wants me. He believes killing the last Lunari will complete what was started 200 years ago. Murmurs of protest began. But I won't let this clan die for me. I won't let children be orphaned because I was too proud or afraid. Aria, no. Cain's voice broke on my name. I walked toward the village edge, toward where Thorn's voice had come from. Behind me I heard Cain shout orders, heard warriors arguing, heard Victoria's voice calling my name. But I kept walking until I reached the border where torches burned and dozens of armed hunters waited. At their center stood Cardinal Thorn, older than I expected, his face lined more with grief than hatred. I'm here, I called out. I surrender myself freely, in exchange for a blood oath that you'll leave Blackwood clan in peace, forever. Thorn stared across the space between us. His hand trembled as it gripped a silver dagger. You would die for them? He asked. For wolves who treated you as nothing? They're my family, I said simply, and family is worth dying for. Something in Thorn's face cracked. My daughter said the same thing once, before a rogue wolf tore her apart. The words hit like a physical blow. Your daughter? Elena. His voice was that of a broken father. She was 8 years old. A wolf under Lunari control slaughtered her in the street while I watched, powerless. I felt tears burning. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for your pain. Sorry? He laughed bitterly. Your kind killed her, made a puppet of a wolf and used it to murder children. And you're sorry? That wasn't a true Lunari, I said, my voice stronger. Lunari are healers. Whoever did that was corrupted, twisted into something evil. But that's not what we are. I took a step forward, past the border, into the space between my clan and the hunters. Your daughter, Elena. What did she love? Thorn's weapon lowered slightly. What? Tell me about her. Not how she died, but how she lived. He stared, confusion and suspicion warring with desperate need. She loved flowers. He said finally, barely above a whisper. Yellow ones especially. She would pick them and bring them to anyone who looked sad, trying to make them smile. She sounds like she was kind, I said gently. Compassionate. Someone who saw pain and wanted to heal it. Like the Lunari were supposed to be, Thorn said bitterly, before they became monsters. Some did become corrupted. I won't lie. Power corrupts. But most were like your Elena. They healed because they couldn't bear suffering. I took another step forward, now within striking distance. You can kill me. Complete your crusade. But will it bring Elena back? Will it heal the hole she left? His hand shook violently, the blade wavering. Or you can choose differently. Honor her memory not with more death, but with mercy, with the compassion she showed others. Let the cycle end here, with this choice. I'm a monster, Thorn whispered. "I've killed so many in her name. Torn apart families, orphaned children, all calling it righteous. But you're right. Elena would have hated what I've become." The blade fell from his hand, clattering against frozen ground. He dropped to his knees, tears streaming down his weathered face. "What have I done?" he asked the sky. "What have I become?" I knelt before him, this man who had hunted my kind for 30 years and took his hands in mine. "You've become what grief makes us capable of becoming," I said gently. "But it's not too late. To become what love, what Elena's love, would want you to be." Behind me, footsteps. Cain appeared at my side, still defensive, but no longer aggressive. Other wolves followed, forming a line but not attacking. And slowly, some of the hunters began lowering their weapons. Thorn looked up at me, at Cain, at the assembled forces. "No more killing," he said, voice gaining strength. "I'm done." I lay down my arms. Not all obeyed. Several hunters broke ranks and fled into darkness, clutching weapons and hatred. But most remained, looking lost without their leader's direction. "There will need to be justice," Cain said, his voice hard but not cruel. "Answers for lives taken. I accept whatever judgment your clan deems fair," Thorn said. "I won't resist. I've run from truth long enough." As the sun began to rise, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, the long war between hunters and Lunari hadn't ended. It would take generations to heal those wounds, but perhaps, finally, it could begin. Over the following days, the village transformed. Thorn remained under guard, but was treated with dignity. The clan buzzed with activity, preparing for what was to come. Asher and Wren recovered under constant care, their wounds healing with remarkable speed. And throughout it all, there was talk of what had happened at the border, of the Omega who had walked into death and returned with peace instead. The third trial, the trial of heart, was declared unnecessary by the council. As Elder Margot pointed out, I had already demonstrated more heart than any trial could measure. I had walked unarmed into certain death for my clan. I had shown compassion to our greatest enemy. I had chosen healing over vengeance. Victoria came to me the day before the Luna ceremony. "We need to talk." We sat together in a quiet corner of the village, two women who had been enemies and were becoming something else. "I challenged you out of pride," she said. "My father pushed me, yes, but I wanted it too. I thought I deserved to be Luna because I was strong, because I had trained, because I came from the right family. And now I understand that Luna isn't about deserving, it's about serving." She met my eyes. "I still think I'm the better fighter, but you're the better leader, and I want to help you lead, if you'll have me." I took her hand. "I need you, Victoria. Your strength, your courage, your willingness to challenge. Promise me you'll never stop questioning when something seems wrong." She smiled, genuine and warm. "I promise. Just promise you'll never stop seeing the best in people, even when they don't deserve it." "I promise." On the 7th day after our return, under the full moon, the Luna ceremony took place. The entire clan assembled in the sacred grove, along with representatives from allied packs and several former hunters who had chosen to stay and learn new ways. Cain stood before me in the ceremonial circle, moonlight turning his scars to silver and his eyes to molten gold. When he spoke, his voice carried clearly. "Aria Moonwhisper, I have searched my whole life for a partner worthy of standing beside me. Not behind, not below, but beside. I found you in the last place I expected, hidden, dismissed, overlooked by everyone but me." He took my hands in his. "You taught me that true strength doesn't dominate, it serves. That the softest voice can carry the most powerful truth. That sometimes the ones we think weakest are actually strongest of all. I choose you, not because you're Lunari, but because you're you. And that's more than enough." When it was my turn, I looked into his amber eyes and spoke from my heart. "Cain Blackthorn, I've spent most of my life invisible. But you saw me. When no one else would look, you saw me. Not what I was classified as, but what I could become. You taught me that being seen isn't the same as being valued. That true partnership means lifting each other up, not standing on each other. I choose you, not the alpha, but the man. the one who values compassion over cruelty, wisdom over strength, growth over tradition. When our lips met, the moon seemed to shine brighter, and I felt the bonding settle into place like a key turning in a lock. Not just political alliance or strategic partnership, but recognition of souls. The clan's howl of approval echoed across the mountains, a sound of joy and hope and new beginnings. As Cain held me under the full moon, surrounded by our clan's celebration, I finally understood my grandmother's words. The moon calls those who have its light within, and when darkness is complete, that's when your light is most needed. The darkness had been complete. I had been invisible, rejected, dismissed as worthless. But I had risen. And in rising, I had shown others that they too could carry light through darkness. I was Aria Moonwhisper, last of the Lunari, Luna of Blackwood clan. The winter Luna had risen, and a new dawn had begun.